So the mainstream media would have you believe that Donald Trump has instituted a ban on Muslims entering the United States, which is a lot of people, more than 20% of the world's population. Oh, what's that you say? It's not all Muslims. It's only these 7 majority Muslim countries, with a combined population of about 220 million. And of course, they're not all Muslims. There are approximately 1.7 million Christians living in or fleeing Syria, for example. So the ban affects less than 15% of the world's Muslims, and as I said, it affects anyone of any faith in those countries. So what does the executive order actually say? For 120 days, the order bars the entry of any refugee who is awaiting resettlement in the US. It also prohibits all Syrian refugees from entering the US until further notice. Additionally, it bans the citizens of 7 majority Muslim countries, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, Libya, and Yemen, from entering the US on any visa category. So to call it a Muslim ban is reaching. Now, there was some confusion when it came to green card holders and people with dual citizenship, but the State Department has cleared that up and has now said those people will be allowed back in the country, although they may be subject to further discretionary questioning. Yes, there are all kinds of stories of people being left stranded, students stuck overseas, companies recalling workers because of a possible impact, and of course protesters being led by none other than Pocahontas herself. But it seems there were more protesters than people actually affected by this order. Now, the selection of those 7 countries was touted in the media as being chosen because Trump doesn't have any business interests in those countries. But he does in Muslim-majority countries not on the list like Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, which sounds like a salacious story, except that it doesn't really stack up. The list of 7 countries was first identified by the Obama administration as countries of concern and placed certain restrictions on travellers who had visited those countries, including those with dual citizenship, on or after March 2011, citing as the rationale the growing threat from foreign terrorist fighters. So Obama's measure was not an outright ban, whereas Trump's is, albeit for a limited period of time. So the business interest angle doesn't wash, but there are other reasonable questions to ask. For example, why not a temporary ban on Pakistan? After all, as Douglas Murray points out, one of the biggest, and for a period the biggest, security threats to America has been from Pakistani nationals or people of Pakistani heritage with UK passports heading to America via the UK. And of course, why not Saudi Arabia, where most of the 9/11 hijackers came from? There was also the claim that this temporary ban was basically the same as the one ordered by the Obama administration in 2011 in response to the arrest of 2 Iraqis for terrorism offences who were residing in the state of Kentucky. However, the validity of the claim of a 6-month ban on Iraqi refugees is dubious as well. The Obama administration basically pledged to re-examine the records of 58,000 Iraqis who had been settled in the US, and they imposed new, more extensive background checks on Iraqi refugees. And this resulted in a significant slowdown in refugee arrivals from 18,251 in 2010 to just 6,339 in 2011, which was then bumped up again to over 16,000 in 2012. The Economist reported about 1,000 soon-to-be immigrants in Iraq were told that they would not be allowed to board flights already booked. Some were removed from planes. Thousands more Iraqi applicants had to restart the immigration process because their security clearances expired when the program stalled. And more recently, former Obama administration official John Feiner denied that any ban in Iraqi refugee admissions was put in place under Obama. Quote, "While the flow of Iraqi refugees slowed significantly during the Obama administration's review, refugees continued to be admitted to the United States during that time, and there was not a single month in which no Iraqis arrived here." Whatever the case, it's fair to say that whilst Trump's order is similar in intent, it is obviously much broader in scope. But I think the legitimate criticism of Trump's executive order was that it was hastily implemented and not particularly well thought through when you take into account the countries that were excluded and the confusion around green card holders and dual citizens. However, again, I refer to Douglas Murray's excellent article from The Spectator. Quote, "There appears to be a certain lack of thought on some of the details of this policy, but it is nothing compared to the lack of thought among the policy's critics. Indeed, the opposition to the ban, from Lily Allen down, is striking for the fact that it has clearly thought about none of the central questions which would have preoccupied us all in recent years. Thus, the people who are portraying the ban as something which is illegal, fascist, etc., are, if I may say so, making a huge long-term mistake. If you decide that border restrictions are fascist, then you are declaring the views of most people to be fascist, because most people believe in border security. If you believe that restricting people coming into your country or any other country is bigoted, then you are claiming that most of the world is filled with bigots, which is something the left really does believe, of course. And if you believe absolutely everybody from everywhere should be treated in exactly the same manner, i.e. that immigration controls should everywhere and always be origin blind, then you are arguing against the security protocols of every border security agency on Earth. Exactly. Now, you would think, given the mainstream media portrayal, that this is a wildly unpopular policy. Well, to lend credence to Douglas Murray's arguments, let's have a look at some polls. According to Rasmussen, 57% of likely US voters favour a temporary ban on refugees compared to 33% opposed. A Reuters Ipsos poll found that 49% of American adults said they either strongly or somewhat agreed with Mr. Trump's order, while 41% strongly or somewhat disagreed, and another 10% said they don't know. That same poll also found that 31% of Americans feel more safe because of the ban, compared with 26% who said they felt less safe. Now, before you accuse me of making an argument based on an appeal to popularity, that's not my point here. My point is to back what Douglas Murray is saying. Most people believe in secure borders, and whilst there are legitimate criticisms of this policy to be had, the meltdown displayed by protesters demonstrates how out of touch they actually are. And of course, what would leftist outrage be without some hypocrisy? I haven't seen it mentioned anywhere in the mainstream media that 6 out of the 7 countries on the list specifically forbid anyone with an Israeli passport from entering their countries. Geert Wilders is exactly right. Is it any surprise that a major part of Trump's campaign platform is actually being implemented now that he's president, albeit in a sloppy and not particularly well thought out way? You see, the problem for the left is that this order tramples directly on one of their sacred cows, their naive and utopian belief of the free flow of peoples across borders. But as Douglas Murray noted, this defies not only what the majority of most people think, but the reality of how every country operates their border security arrangements.